Overstock accepts Bitcoin. Overstock invests in Bitcoin. And now Overstock is launching a first-of-its-kind alternative trading system that will provide a real U.S. exchange for digital assets categorized as securities in the United States by the SEC. And on the other side of the world, the banks in Japan are considering launching the J-Coin, directly intended to eliminate cash as a payment option right before the Tokyo Games coming in 2020. So how will Overstock's new ATS system help or hurt the flood of new users and new ICO projects in the space? Is the J-Coin in Japan a sign that governments around the world are set to start their own proprietary national cryptocurrencies? And people really, really hate SegWit2X. Let's discuss. Hey everybody, I'm Gary Palmer Jr., you're you, and together, welcome to Minting Coins. So there's a lot coming out in the news as always, but what we are just seeing today and what we're seeing yesterday is that this news is good. There's been a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt coming out of different regulatory environments, coming out of China, coming out of JP Dimon, Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase CEO. But what we're seeing now is a lot of hype, a lot of speculation, a lot of movement from regulators, financial institutions, even countries that's taking Bitcoin, taking cryptocurrency and blockchain, and really laying down the foundation for the next layer of infrastructure, the next layer of acceptance, the next layer of payment and messaging transaction services for people and businesses and potentially countries to take huge advantage of. There's a lot to talk about, so tap that like button, leave your thoughts in the comment box below, check us out on SteemIt. We're going to pop into the market, take a peek at the news, and let's discuss. Alright, starting over here at coinmarketcap.com, we're living in a world with over 1,128 different cryptocurrencies and a total market cap of $141.8 billion. There's a lot more money in the space, as there has been in the past couple weeks, and it's moving in the upward direction now. 24-hour trading volume, $3.4 billion, so that's up where it has been in the past couple of days, and the Bitcoin dominance, BTC, is still strong at 47.7%, above that 45% mark still. We did see it drop below that 40% mark a few months ago, back when Bitcoin was booming, and the whole space was exploding. I think it's safe to expect to see the Bitcoin BTC dominance decrease as some of these other tokens start to appreciate and accelerate in terms of their value with the news that's coming out. So look at some of the coins specifically. We have Bitcoin over the $4,000 mark at $4,077 at over $67.6 billion alone. And then we have Ripple up 10%, Neo up 22%, Zcash up 22.98%, almost 23%. Very, very interesting. The news about Neo is that they're going to be moving from China, their headquarters, into somewhere else. I believe Hong Kong, could be South Korea. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Hong Kong though. Not sure what's going on with Ripple today, but Zcash just its roadmap with its technology, the whole ZK Snark technology, is set to be built into the top 2 blockchain technologies around, both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Bitcoin is going to be integrating Zcash, Ethereum is going to be integrating Zcash, and while there's never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoins, and right now there's never going to be more than relatively how much, let's say right now there's 100 million Ethereum, maybe 200 million Ethereum. little bit of inflation there. Still, with the Zcash, there's only 2.2 million of these things around in existence, and they're very, very limited based on the Bitcoin blockchain technology. Alongside Zcash, just note that there's a hard fork of Zcash into Z Classic, which was like Zcash, but in some ways better. And then Z Classic hard fork from Z Classic into Zencash. And Zencash is very, very promising with the original Zcash technology, but improved with the developers who are working on its roadmap for it to be a more secure, more decentralized, more private cryptocurrency that doesn't have some of the possible flaws that that they believe Zcash may have. You can check that out. That's called Zencash. So moving on to the news, we have Overstock, and we have through Overstock we have new regulated ICOs exchange for legal token trading. And so in the capital markets arm of Overstock, their blockchain-focused subsidiary Medici, is that how that's pronounced, is launching a first-of-its-kind alternative trading system known as an ATS. And it's going to be trading cryptographic tokens, digital tokens, cryptocurrencies that are classified as securities by the SEC in the United States. And so there's a lot of different companies involved with what's going on here. And so this is a joint venture between RenGen, which is a fintech firm that will serve as the market maker, and Argon Group, which is an investment bank specializing in ICO capital raising. So this ATS will be regulated by the SEC, both the SEC and FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. And so this channel isn't a financial channel, we're not financial advice, none of this is financial advice, this is just talking about the news and sharing ideas and speculation about the news and the technology that's coming out. But if you want financial advice, you want to speak to a financial advisor, and financial advisors, what they can and cannot do is all highly regulated, and it's highly regulated through FINRA. So this article goes on to say that in short, the ATS is going to offer a legally approved, regulated alternative to major securities exchanges that you may already know and love. Major securities exchanges such as the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, both of which have huge interests in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So Patrick Bryan, the CEO of Overstock, goes on to say that he thinks this is a historic event. Excuse me. And that he goes on to say that we're opening a new type of capital market. And so this historic event, this new type of capital market, is the first of its kind in the world. This is the only one that exists, and it's existing at an extremely early stage of the game. So year to date, the cryptocurrency investment market is booming, and the $2 billion mark has been eclipsed according to the CoinDesk ICO tracker. And this $2 billion mark may be simply a drop in the bucket. It may be just a small sign of things to come. And Argon's general counsel and the interim CEO, Emma Channing, told CoinDesk that she believes that her new firm's ATS could see $2 billion in trading within the next 12 months. And that's just their platform alone. And that's just the first 12 months. And so there could be huge amounts of trading of all these different ICO securities tokens, of which the traditional blockchain exchanges don't want to touch. You know, these are removed from exchanges in America. These are removed from applications like Shapeshift from being shape-shifted around. And so if you're going to want to get in with some of these tokens and have some of these tokens in your portfolio, then more than likely you're going to be using this ATS system owned by Overstock. So in addition to the the liquidity for creating a new type of security, this platform is also going to reduce the transaction costs to 80-90% that the models currently used by the traditional securities and exchanges. And so we know the institutional financial organizations, the institutional banks and intermediaries, They really see huge opportunity in blockchain technology because of the opportunity of the blockchain technology to decrease costs and increase the settlement times, to make these faster settlement times. And by doing so, they're going to unlock so much more money, so much more capital that can not just be used once, but can be used over and over and over again between all these different transactions, speeding up the amount of fees, the amount of transactions, and the overall amount of capital that's flowing through all of these people's systems. And that's just going to be a huge amount of revenue and energy that, that these traditional organizations are really looking forward to. In addition, so it's really interesting that when all these ICOs are forming, ICOs are currently forming in ways that make it so they don't meet the definition of the SEC's definition of a security. And by doing so, they could be giving up a lot of liquidity. But now what they have is a potential to be traded somewhere where they can have that liquidity, where they can promise a return, where they can promise portfolio tokens, all sorts of interesting things and interesting ways of providing a financial return. And at the moment, this Overstock, this Overstock ATS is the only one in the world approved by the SEC to do it, and Overstock owns it. So very, very interesting what's coming down the pipeline for them. This is huge in terms of access to these cryptocurrencies, access to the liquidity, and how are all these tokens traded? Well, they're probably paired with Bitcoin one place or another, and all this is going to be in exchange for Bitcoin or other different cryptocurrencies, overall increasing market understanding, market adoption, and that in turn is going to lead to these cryptocurrencies that the banks and the governments and the traditional financial institutions have no control over as well. Going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. So if you check out the Overstock tag at coindesk.com, you can see some of the additional news that comes out about this company. And so we know that Overstock accepts Bitcoin, Overstock accepts Ether, Overstock accepts Litecoin. I didn't realize it, I missed this article, but Overstock is keeping 50% of all the Bitcoin payments as an investment. And so that's very, very interesting that they're holding on to that Bitcoin because they're not exchanging it for cold hard cash, but they're storing it in their vaults, realizing that the value of each of this Bitcoin can go from, you know, $4,000 of Bitcoin to 40,000 or to 40 million potentially. They just recognize that the value, the opportunity is there for a company like Overstock to keep half of it and just wait to see what happens. And with the news today of them having this exchange, that's going to allow them to build up so much more in terms of the cryptocurrency, which is going to give them massive amounts of firing power to have all that capital as its value increases exponentially, and other companies are displaced because they're left holding giant suitcases of fiat that, you know, no one's going to really want to accept potentially. Not as much as they're going to want to accept Bitcoin. You're going to want a suitcase full of cash that anyone can take from you, or you're going to want a simple Bitcoin transaction that will be on the blockchain. We'll see. So, and so this isn't just Overstock, and this isn't just companies, but this is then moving up the chain, and you could say it's moving down the chain, how these things happen, because the countries and because the banking institutions are paving the way for acceptance, for regulation, and for processes and procedures for this to be part of the new industrial order. The companies are existing. And the companies are moving forward, some companies being bolder than other companies. But in Japan, we have the rapid mainstream adoption for retailers and merchants as they integrate Bitcoin. So in Japan, they made Bitcoin legal throughout the entire nation, and anyone can work with Bitcoin. We have Big Camera, which is one of the largest electronics retailers in Japan, with extremely strong brand power across the country. And they've been accepting Bitcoin as a payment method for months through a partnership with Bitflyer, which is the largest Bitcoin exchange in Japan. And especially since the crackdown in China, the amount of trading that's been happening in Japan has been well over 50% of all the Bitcoin transactions happening through Japan. And that's 50% of all the Bitcoin transactions on the Bitcoin network through the exchanges and whatnot in Japan. So it's a lot of interest happening, a lot of crypto that's being flooded into their nation. And as the mainstream media networks there and the news publications in Japan have also begun to providing extensive coverage of Bitcoin, increasing its profile, which is increasing the demand, in turn, creating the liquidity for the businesses to then want to sell their products and services. And this is being led not just by countless micro retailers across the nation, but also some of the largest organizations there in Japan, like Bic Camera, or as we were just seeing before, Overstock. And so this is great news that we're hearing more and more about this, because if users and customers' experience had been poor, then they would have pulled out of this deal and they wouldn't want to deal with it. But because they're kicking it into a higher level of gear, this is just showing the success that they've been having and how they want to continue moving forward. And so we're just seeing these signs everywhere. Yesterday we saw a random sign with Jerry, who was it? With Dave Chappelle and Jerry Seinfeld, and then there was a Bitcoin sign in that photo that we saw yesterday. And then here there's just like a We Accept Bitcoin sign, and so these We Accept Bitcoin signs are popping up more and more and more. If you have a business, what's holding you back from accepting Bitcoin? If you sell products or services, what's holding you back from accepting Bitcoin? If you have a favorite place that you like to go to, what's stopping you from asking them, if they've considered accepting Bitcoin? Just help push this along, help increase the adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies for everybody around us. And so not only is this happening in Japan with the increasing of the usage from companies and from people, but keep in mind that we're talking about companies like GMO, which are targeting, that they're working in Japan to increase the amount of Bitcoin that's being mined in Japan, to increase it to about 7% of the global Bitcoin network, to have that new Bitcoin be mined from Japan and be distributed through the businesses and the people who live in Japan. And so at this rate, if merchants, financial institutions, and investors continue to adopt and embrace Bitcoin, then it's highly likely that we're going to see mainstream adoption of Bitcoin sooner than later in Japan in the coming months. And so is this just from the companies? Is this just from the consumers? Is this just from the retailers? Is this, what about the banks, and what about the country kicking in? Well, Cointelegraph has released this article talking about how the country Japan, and the banks in Japan are considering launching what they're calling a J-coin, which is going to essentially intended to eliminate cash as a payment option in Japan. And so cash transactions, as we've talked about before in this video and other videos, are expensive. They increase how long it takes for a transaction to happen. They increase the cost of a transaction. Cash transactions are just more expensive and less efficient in the whole financial world than digital transactions. And so the J-coin is intended to function in tandem with the yen rather than replacing it. So it's intended to eliminate cash as a payment option, and it's also intended to work in tandem with the yen. But I suppose it's possible the key word here is intended, and at some point it could easily pivot to not working in tandem, but working in replace of the yen. And so it'll be really interesting to see how that works. But initially, at least, the J-coin would be exchanged on a 1-to-1 ratio with the yen, and then they would just be able to watch to see how that goes. And I'm sure it'd be a great experiment for the rest of the world's banks to see how does that function in Japan, because then they can take what they learned there and move that over to other countries in the world. Just as they've been able to see how negative interest rates are working in Japan, they can use it as a case study to recognize how negative interest rates would affect banks in other parts of the world. And so ultimately what this comes down to is that governments around the world are seeking to start their own proprietary cryptocurrencies, their own national cryptocurrencies. And we could, I think, use this information from this article to extrapolate what we would expect to happen from other countries in the world, where other countries may also be considering to issue their own digital currency, that they may have a timeline in the next 3 to 5 years, that their intention may be to eliminate cash as a payment option, that it would be their intention to have it be work in tandem in a 1-to-1 ratio, and then to move on from there. So it'll be really interesting when the first country does this, it'll be really interesting when the second country does this, and then to see how the domino effect really falls all the way down. I think the last thing that's just interesting is the timeline. They're talking about doing this before the 2020 Olympic Games. I don't know what that means in 2020 Olympic Games. So, right, that's just 3 years away. That's a world away, but it's not so far away that we shouldn't be thinking about it or recognizing it or looking for other signs about it, and really seeing how that plays out. It's probably going to be more than definitely major news in the space, and we're going to be paying attention to that and sharing that information with you as we get it along here. So in terms of the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency and the blockchain industry, we're in this situation with Bitcoin, and there's massive changes with the SegWit2X. We were talking about this yesterday as well, but Bitcoin added on SegWit, activated SegWit through a very long, drawn-out process, and when that happened, Bitcoin Cash had forked away from Bitcoin, so there's Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. And now we're at the point where with the New York agreement that we had agreed to increase Bitcoin from a 1 megabyte block limit to a 2 megabyte block limit after the SegWit had been increased. But as we mentioned yesterday, a lot of people are backing out of this SegWit2X agreement because the intention of the New York agreement was for Bitcoin to not fork. But because Bitcoin has forked, they don't have to, at least they're saying that they don't have to increase the 2x because it's just a means of manipulation to increasing the number of forks of Bitcoin, the confusion of Bitcoin, the control of Bitcoin. And when some people are looking at the code inside of the Bitcoin, they're saying that the SegWit2X code is a mess. And so it's hard for me to say because there's definitely smarter people who understand the code a lot better than I do. But if you want, you can take a look at this link in the show notes below, and this will take you over to GitHub where you can take a peek at this. And maybe you know what you're looking at. Maybe you want to take a look at this. Maybe you want to, note in the comments below if the code looked good to you, or are they just copying the Bitcoin core and making tweaks to it? Because the Bitcoin Cash has not been successful, even by the Roger Ver's expectations with the Bitcoin difficulty, with the Bitcoin Cash difficulty adjustment rate, and how that's been creating issues of the mining and rates of inflation that Bitcoin Cash has. And that Bitcoin Cash code had been clunky and prone to errors, and now we're seeing, or at least hearing, that the SegWit2X code is clunky and could also be prone to errors. So the sentiment from what we were talking about yesterday about the SegWit2X stuff, with what Whale Panda, the information that he released, and also the full email release from Vinny Lingham, this is essentially the sentiment of the majority of people in the community. That the New York Agreement signers love to say that we're on the same side. We are not. If you're pushing for a contentious fork, a contentious hard fork, that will harm Bitcoin, you're an enemy. And that's what That's what Samson over here is saying. That's what a great majority of people are saying, and that's what the information from yesterday's fiasco and yesterday's Bitcoin drama is really leading to. And so then we have this post coming from Adam Beck. Anyone who thinks developers will work on SegWit2X with a New York agreement hasn't been paying attention. And so just keep in mind that if Bitcoin does fork with the Bitcoin Core and the Bitcoin 2X, then all of these developers who have been making Bitcoin great, all of these developers who have been working on Bitcoin, we're talking about dozens and dozens of people versus very few people who are working on the 2X code. Adam Beck is saying none of these guys are going to switch over to work on the 2X code. They're just going to continue working on the core code. And so with the New York agreement, with all of these different companies that are, you know, taking a stand against it, taking a stand for it, and even the people who are standing in the middle doing nothing, after this 2X bit happens, and then we're stuck with yet another Bitcoin, some companies are going to support the Bitcoin Core, some companies are going to support the Bitcoin 2X, and it's going to create this confusion in the marketplace. It's going to create confusion in the exchanges, it's going to create confusion in the places that people buy, it's going to create confusion in the places that people sell, it's going to create confusion for traders, for holders. Maybe not so much for holders. If you're a holder, you just got to hold your Bitcoin and do nothing. You'll be fine. If we end up in the future with 3 different Bitcoins and they're all like whatever price, then you'll just have access to all of them. So I guess holders are the most safe. But the point that we're getting to with this tweet and this post coming from Adam is that all of these Bitcoin developers are going to continue working on the Bitcoin that they believe in their heart of hearts is the real Bitcoin, which means that if the SegWit2X Bitcoin is supported by major companies and the SegWit2X Bitcoin has shoddy code, then it's only a matter of time before those companies drop the SegWit2X, have to deal with that fiasco, and just we overall as a community get through all of this confusion, all of this uncertainty, and all of the fear that could be created if you're someone that has to make a transaction and you have to risk, you know, replay attacks and losing your money or not sending the right money. It's just not fun. So my advice to you is to hold. Use Litecoin if you need. This is one of the reasons why Litecoin is so spectacular, is because there's just one Litecoin now, and it works flawlessly, as we've been seeing with the tweets from Charlie Lee, with Bitcoin. And so people with Litecoin and Bitcoin put together, people are going to be able to hoard their Bitcoin, and they're going to be able to spend their Litecoin for transactions, and then when they receive money from those transactions, they'll be able to atomically swap that into Bitcoin, and just it's going to create a wonderful ecosystem, I suspect, for Bitcoin Gold and Litecoin Silver, and just increasing the overall money supply while facilitating digital cash payments, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and Litecoin as digital cash, and at the same time holding on to Bitcoin and Litecoin as a store of value. So this is just fulfilling the ultimate promise by merging these technologies together. And then if they take the ZK Snark technology from the Zen, or not the Zen Cash, but the Zcash, then what can happen is then you increase it a little bit more, you add on the privacy, and you get this melting pot of all these cryptocurrencies coming together. And when we have the original internet, what do we have? We had www, we had HTTP, we had SMTP, we had all these different things, and you put them all together, and now we have an iPhone. And so in the future, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of wallets we have that are just using all of these different technologies around us. Very, very interesting indeed. So all this information will be in the show notes below. You'll be able to check this out. And last but not least, the last article we have here on the list is this post from CNBC. Not as mainstream as Forbes. CNBC has been relatively bullish on Bitcoin for quite some time. When I say quite some time, I mean this year, the past few months. And this article from CNBC is just saying that this early Bitcoin investor, I'm not going to try pronouncing this, Shamath, declares that nobody can stop Bitcoin, and that the idea that the government can put curbs on this is actually pretty specious. And he said in response to the JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon's criticism of Bitcoin. And so, yeah, a lot of people are trying to give good advice around Bitcoin and blockchain technology, but their good advice is actually deceptive or just completely wrong, maliciously or not. And ultimately, people that study this technology are all saying the same thing. This cannot be stopped. This can not be shut off. This can not really be controlled. This can not necessarily be duplicated because of the network effect, because Bitcoin is just so big and so bold, and there's so much invested into its existence and its infrastructure, more than the market cap of Bitcoin itself. Then there's just a lot backing Bitcoin, and ultimately the fundamental underlying technology, the genie's out of the bag, and Bitcoin is going to exist forever. And so as the demand increases and the supply decreases, it's really interesting not just to think about what happens in 2020, but to think about what's going to happen in 2030, what's going to happen in 2035, what's going to happen in 2040 when there's only, I don't know, 19 million Bitcoins in existence. And what is the demand going to be then for each of these Bitcoins? I guess if we're even still around as a species, let's assume we are. I'm an optimist. I think we'll make it through all of this craziness, but I think that we're going to grow and we're going to evolve with the technology with us. So that's a lot of interesting information. There's a lot going in there. I'd love to know, what do you think about Overstock positioning themselves, starting from just accepting cryptocurrencies, moving into saving cryptocurrencies, and now completely pivoting with their capital arm to have this first ever exchange for ICO securities. It's going to increase the number of ICO securities. What do you think about Overstock doing that? What do you think about J-Coin in Japan and the banks of Japan creating a digitized cryptocurrency for their nation? And how long do you think it's going to be until we see the European Union, the central bank of the European Union, do this, or maybe the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States? Very, very interesting indeed. And what do you think about this SegWit2X? Are you going to be supporting the SegWit2X, or are you just as confused as the majority of us out here? Are you going to just hold on to your Bitcoin? And if you do make transactions, have you switched to making Litecoin transaction payments instead? Love to start to get that conversation going, share that information with other people so other people can have an idea of what to do, since the majority of people who are inside the Bitcoin space are really inside Bitcoin for speculation. And I'd say there's another group of people that are inside the Bitcoin space because of the promise that Bitcoin brings for the freedom of speech and the freedom of life. But in addition to the speculators and the traders, there's people who are investing in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin because they actually want to make payments. So they actually just want to get ahead of the curve. And so are you someone who's using payments, and would you use Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ether to purchase something on Overstock? Very interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So with that being said, thanks for showing up. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being part of this show. Tap that like button. Leave your thoughts in the notes below. Check us out on SteemIt. Visit us on mintingcoins.com. Be part of our community over there. We're building a paid community of individuals who care about each other, who care about this information, where we don't have to worry about the trolls or the people who are in there just to get a quick rise or to deceive us. We have curated information with people who really care about what's going on, and I'd love to see you over there and to have more of us over there sharing that information. But until next time, when we're putting another video out here for you on YouTube and on SteemIt, until then, I'm glad that together we're minting coins.